Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 43, is the second in the Scrap Fabric Challenge series. But before we get to that, let's get to my opinion. Nomenclature, one of my favorite words. What is it? It is phraseology or a system of terms used in a particular art or science. Well, within a quilter's nomenclature, there are several things that can be called different names, and it doesn't make them wrong. For example, this block can be peaky and spike, it can be a V block, and it can be a triangle and a square. Neither's wrong, they're just different names for the same unit. I call things cornerstones. Other people call them posts. I call it sashing. Other people say lattice. We call it batting here in the States. Other parts of the world call it wadding. None is wrong. They're just different names for the same thing. There are things, however, in a quilter's nomenclature that are absolute. Give me a second while I switch out the whiteboard. I can't tell you how many videos I've watched where a quilter cuts a square and calls it a diamond. I even saw one video where the pattern of the quilt was called diamonds and it was all squares. I have come to the opinion that many quilters need a refresher in geometry. What is a square? A square is a four-sided polygon, 4 equal sides with 4 90-degree angles. If you take this square and you turn it 45 degrees, it's still a square. It has 4 equal sides with 4 90-degree angles. What is a diamond? A diamond in geometry is called a rhombus. And this still has 4 equal sides, as does the square. What's the difference? The difference is the angles. Now, I'm showing you 60-degree diamonds and 45-degree because those are the two commonly used in quilting. However, you can get diamond shapes with different degrees. They just still all have to add up to 360. And you have to have 2 acute angles that are equal, which are the smaller ones, and 2 obtuse angles, which opposite and equal, which in this case are the 120s. In the 45, the 45s are opposite and equal, and the 135s are opposite and equal. Now, while many of you have had your eyes glaze over, why is this important? This is important when you're changing a pattern or adding to a pattern, and you need to know what angle to cut. Do you remember my ribbon twist by Krista Moser? This is her free download. You can go to her website and get this pattern for free. But if you recall, in her pattern, she wanted you to cut these diamonds in half to make a straight edge. Well, after using good fabric and working on these diamonds, I'm like, hell no, I'm not going to cut those in half. So if I don't want to cut these in half, how am I going to get a straight edge? I'm going to get a straight edge by putting in a diamond here. A triangle here. It actually comes out to be a half of a diamond. So what angle am I cutting? These are 60-degree diamonds. So this has to be a 120-degree angle. If you take your 60-degree diamond ruler and you lay it up here, you can see that this is the 60-degree diamond, but it's the 120-degree angle here, that obtuse one that I said, and it's half of it. So you cut those for your setting triangles and you don't have to cut your diamonds in half. Now, you can also use that on a 45-degree project. This was a square, and I didn't want to make a square candle mat, I like to make it octagonal. So I know that I have to cut these triangles at 135, which should be, yes, 135. And if you lay this ruler, which again is a 45-degree diamond, on here, you will see that that's the 135 angle. So the knowing of how the math works on the angles will help you make your project the way you want to make it, not necessarily the way the pattern was originally written. That's my opinion. Let's get to today's episode. Okay, let's continue on with the scrap fabric challenge. If you recall, last week's quilt is here, and I cut 4.5-inch strips and subcut them, as you can see here, into 4.5, 6.5, 8.5, and 10.5-inch pieces. And my challenge is to not put any of what I pulled for this back into the scrap heap. I have no rules about adding more for the remaining quilts, but I can't put anything from this quilt back in the heap. So after I made this one, my second one is here, and I just kind of made it up, and my measurements are based on what I had cut from here already. So I'm calling this one a pop of color. I had to pull a few of these bright colors in here to give this quilt some interest. If it was all total black and white, I think it would be boring. So what I did was I used 4.5-inch squares. I used 2.5-inch pieces cut at 4.5, so that gives you a 4.5-inch square. And then just a few of these have a square of color in it. So it's two 2.5-inch squares and a 2.5 by 4.5-inch piece. And I only use those in a few places. Here, some of them are all black and white. In fact, most of them are all black and white, and just a few have one side of these a color. And the numbers worked out great because I had these cut at 4.5 already. So it was very easy to cut 4.5-inch pieces for the half squares and the whole squares. So this came together really quick and easy. You can make yours any size, but I made mine 14 across by 17, and that comes to 56 by 68, which I like that size. I watched a video today that I think she said was 90 by 106. I don't want to make 90 by 106. You have to bind those. And the bigger the quilt, the harder it is to bind. So I really prefer this kind of size that's more of a lap size. Now, one thing from this quilt to this quilt is I really didn't want them to all look the same, which was why I added the color here. There's no rule in my challenge. If you are going to do the challenge with me, your quilts, 4 quilts, can look the same if you so choose. That's not part of the challenge. The only challenge is to not put anything back into the scrap pile that you pulled for the first quilt. But I'm aiming to make mine look a little different from quilt to quilt. And it was funny, when I've started the 3rd quilt in this series, which you'll see hopefully next week, I felt a little bit like an Amish bread starter, where you make your bread from the starter, and then you take a little piece and put it aside, and that starts your next one. That's kind of how I felt from some of these pieces went into here, and then some of the pieces here go into the next one, and is going to go into the 4th one as well. Before we wrap it up for today, I wanted you to get a better view of the 2nd quilt in the series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got something out of today's video, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.